In some experiments, you may want to test two different groups to see if there is a difference between them. This means that you will collect two sets of data. One way of doing so is by conducting the t-test. Let's say you want to find if there is a difference in mass between the leaves of a specific plant which grow in shade and the leaves of the same plant which grow in light. In this case, you will collect leaves from shade and light and conduct a t-test. One thing to keep in mind when conducting a t-test, make your sample size big enough so that your data are reliable, meaning more accurate. For the same example, you may select from each side of the plant around 20 leaves. Sometimes when dealing with participants, it could be difficult to come up with a large sample size, so it would be fine to have 10 participants, but this may affect the reliability of your data. Before conducting the t-test, you need to come up with the following two hypotheses. The null hypothesis, which states that there is no significant difference between the mass of leaves in shade and the mass of leaves in light, and the difference noted is maybe due to chance or error. In simple words, this means that you do not think that the mass between the two groups is going to be different, and whether plants grow in shade or light, the mass of their leaves is not affected. The alternative hypothesis, which states that there is a significant difference between the mass of leaves in shade and the mass of leaves in light, and the difference noted is not due to chance or error. This means that you believe that mass between the two groups is going to be different, and mass of leaves is affected by growing in shade or light. To answer the question, if there is a significant difference between the two groups or not, specifically between their means, you need to conduct the t-test by calculating a value known as the p-value. The p-value is the probability value, which indicates that chance alone is responsible for that difference. Based on this value, you can decide which hypothesis to accept and which to reject. The p-value can be calculated very easily using Microsoft Excel or using a calculator. You can use Microsoft Excel following these steps. First, insert your data for both groups in an Excel sheet, as you see here. Then select a clear cell where you want the p-value to be calculated. Then you hit on the board equals, write t-test, open brackets, enter array 1 by selecting the values of the first group. This means that mean of these values is taken in. Then hit comma, then enter array 2 by selecting the values of the second group. Hit comma again, then we need to determine how many tails our test has. If you predict that there would be a significant difference between the two groups, then insert 1. But if you are unclear, it is always best to do a two-tail test and insert 2 here. Then hit comma again, and finally you need to insert the type. And this is where you are telling Excel whether these data come from the same sample or different sample. You have to enter a number here from 1 to 3, depending on your experiment. If your data comes from the same sample, enter 1. If your data comes from different groups but have equal variance, enter 2. If your data comes from different groups but you are not sure about the variance, then enter 3. Close your brackets and hit enter. The value that appears here is the p-value. Once you calculate the p-value, you have two options. If the p-value is lower than 5%, which is 0.05, this means that there is low probability that chance alone could produce the difference. This means that we are more than 95% confident that the difference is real and not due to chance only. So we can conclude that the difference between the two groups is significant and not due to chance only. And accordingly, we reject the null hypothesis and accept the alternative hypothesis. In our example for leaves, this means that there is a significant difference between the mass of leaves in shade and the mass of leaves in light. If the p-value is more than 5%, which is 0.05, This means that there is high probability that chance alone could produce the difference. This means that we are less than 95% confident that the difference is real and not due to chance. So we can conclude here that the difference between the two groups is not significant and is probably due to chance only. And accordingly, we accept the null hypothesis and reject the alternative hypothesis. In our experiment for leaves, this means that there is no significant difference between the mass of leaves in shade and the mass of leaves in light. The best way to represent your data when comparing two sets of data is using a bar graph. By the way, if the error bars overlap here, it indicates that there is no significant difference, and this could be used to support your conclusion based on the p-value you obtained. But what if you have more than two groups of data to compare? You don't use the t-test in this case. Instead, you conduct something called ANOVA test. Join me in the next lesson to learn how to perform an ANOVA test. Stay tuned.